Okay, thank you, Councilmember Thomas. Good morning, everyone. Let me just start out by saying, first of all, we are in unprecedented, uncharted territory in terms of responding to the COVID-19 virus. And more specifically, we don't really even know yet the impact of what this is going to be economically in terms of its disaster impact on businesses throughout Dallas and across the state and across the country. So when I mention the word uncharted territory, we are working sort of on the fly, trying to figure out ongoing strategies. So the first strategy, as Councilmember Thomas was alluding to, is the creation of the rental and tenant rental mortgage assistance program and the small business continuity fund. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, then I'll go into some other areas, because this is just really the beginning of what we're going to have to think collectively to put together. So when you think about economic recovery, there really isn't any economic recovery without having housing stabilization. So the nature of the fund was created for up to $1,500 for a 90-day period to, at a minimum, hopefully provide some relief to residents in Dallas. We know it's not the silver bullet, but it's something that we can at least start with, in hoping that other resources start to come online as well to help stabilize the housing community. I suspect that beginning May 4th, the applications for this program is going to open up, and we are anticipating a mad rush to access those dollars. So right now, the numbers are at about $13.7 million, which by and large is it's a pretty significant number for Dallas when you look at other cities. I'm looking at other cities, and their numbers are not necessarily as close to ours in terms of the comprehensive package. This was basically put together in 3 weeks, a 3-week period to help respond. So when we're talking about the target population, 80% of the area median income, which is basically what the area median income is, about $53,000, $80% of that is the maximum. We believe we can support about 1,000 households with those funds. Now, in addition to that, we have the Small Business Continuity Fund, which, let me talk a little bit about that, because that program is being launched at $5 million. It has a dedicated portion in there of about $1.25 million for small businesses serving underserved communities. And that is a big distinction, because when the businesses within the underserved communities, in particular African-American businesses, businesses that don't have the real access to capital, are really being left behind. So we're trying to make a concerted effort to target resources to that population. And it will be a separate track in the application process for that business segment. So the way we're also looking at this is the fund is designed to also accept other resources into the fund. So we're hoping that this can leverage and grow more resources as we identify, because we know the $5 million is just really the beginning, but how do we look at additional resources to really beef up the fund? We will continue to do that throughout the year with an idea of not putting pressure on the city's general fund. How can we find resources that are not necessarily the city's general fund? I just think it's important for people to also understand the city of Dallas resources are not infinite. So we're trying to leverage everything that we have in terms of trying to put these pieces together. Will there be a quick, mad rush on both programs? Absolutely. We're gearing up our presence via the web, and also our ability to answer calls for residents and business owners calling in to access the fund. Will it go really fast? Absolutely, which I think is going to be no different than the current SBA source snapshot. The first round of federal funding had about 1.6 million applicants. That fast. In the queue is an additional 1.6 million applications. So even when the SBA's new round of funding, that money should be, I would probably say, within 72 hours. So we know that our numbers are not the level of the federal government, but we're looking at this as a. So I want to just sort of conclude with that. We can start to have some discussion, because I just think that this is going to require some creativity, some aligned thinking as we move forward. And the ad hoc committee will be looking at other ways, other strategies we can start to deploy. So we launched these two programs inside of 3 weeks. We need to also say, coming out in the next several weeks will be some additional strategies that we're going to be looking at. So we will be looking for input, guidance, information to help us craft what we think the next path forward is going to be. Because this is going to be a W curve, sort of up, it's going to be down. There is no switch that's going to come on and all of a sudden everybody's going to be back to business. We're going to have to build this thing, which also is an opportunity to look at areas that we've not considered before, things we have not tried before. I think it's an opportunity for us to look across the spectrum and do things we have not done before. So I think that's going to be important. So there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. We want to come out of this tunnel with the ability to create and build a more inclusive community in Dallas. So I'll just end with that, and we'll take some questions. Oh,
Casey, we can't. Casey, you're muted. We can't hear you. Casey.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute myself and wasn't able to. What I'm going to do is start with some questions. I don't think it's in the chat. I don't know if that's me with the mic or background. All right. Now, as I was saying, we're going to start with just a few questions I have. I don't see anything currently in the chat. A lot of these questions I probably know the answer to, but those who have not been a part of this process don't. And so, Dr. Johnson, first question is, and this came up in our discussion, why did we decide to include mortgage along with tenants?
Well, because we also know that there are, if you look at the caps of the program at 80% of area median income, there are individuals out there in that price point that are homeowners. So when you look at the income, $50,000+ area median income, you do the math on that, someone that purchased a home would definitely fall into that category. They sort of would be on the margins of being able to hold on to their home because their income is not substantial. We're not talking about people that have homes in excess of $450,000, $500,000. These are people that have gone through hard working opportunities to get to a point of home ownership, and they are basically facing potentially a crisis as well. And it's very similar to the rental situation, because many could argue that what you're paying in terms of your mortgage at the price point, the target income we're looking at here, they will be basically facing the same thing. And I think one thing that's important to note is that the program is capped at 80% of area median income. And when you do the numbers on that, that is that is just regular people in terms of the income. I would say it's probably 40-something thousand dollars a year. If you do the 80% calculation on 80% of area median income, and that's really, really the answer. It could be someone that went through a first-time homebuyers program, through one of the programs throughout the city, over the last couple of years that worked hard in their life to get to a point of home ownership, and a program like this would basically help address that.
Excellent. Let's talk about this. Talk about, as it relates to this particular program, what is the criteria if I'm someone who's lost my job as a result of a bar, restaurant, or other non-essential business being closed down? What is the criteria and what is the process once I'm aware of this program, I decide I'm going to complete the application? What is that I need to know?
The first thing you need to know is that, again, it's going up to the 80% of area median income. That's number one, which more than likely people are going to qualify from that perspective. Number two would be showing some sort of proof or documentation that you've been laid off from the job, that you've been impacted by the COVID virus. For example, I've been working at restaurant X, and the restaurant manager gave us notice, in some form of writing or something, to say that because of the COVID virus, you are now laid off, right? Those two items will be the most important pieces to the puzzle. I would say you need to have that type of information ready, handy, as soon as the application process opens up. We would also say to people too, if you're receiving resources from somewhere else, not to apply to this program, because that will be a question that will be asked through the application process. So if you've gotten, I'm making this up, you've got $2,500 from the, I'm just making it up, from the Red Cross to help pay your rent, we would say that you probably should not apply to this program and allow others who don't have access, who have not received any support, to apply to the program. So up to 80% of area median income, which is really from 0 to 80% of area median income, documentation proof that you have been laid off, impacted by the COVID virus, and also having the contact information for your landlord, because the payments, landlord and or lender, will go directly to them and not directly to the person.
Excellent. Let's talk about the Small Business Continuity Fund. Tell us about, because we have a lot of businesses that are hurting. Tell us about the criteria. If I'm mom and pop, I own a local business. I've had this business for 30 years, family-owned business. We've done fairly well, but now we're shut down. Don't know when we'll have opportunity to reopen. Not benefiting us pretty much to do carry out, because we're used to having people, most of our clients or most of our customers are people who come in, enjoy the dining experience. Tell me what should I do if I'm interested in either the grant or the loan?
I think right now you should be looking at a couple of things. One, your business is in Dallas. Number two, you have no more than 50 employees. You can have as few as 5, as few as 2 to access the program. But you will have a choice to look at a grant option and or a loan option. And that's important distinction. And you will also have a distinction between businesses serving underserved communities. So for example, let's say you are a neighborhood pizza or burger place that's been an institution in a neighborhood, and you have not necessarily had the wherewithal to access capital from the banks, but you're doing pretty good in terms of providing that presence in the neighborhood. We would say, go to the site, go to the link that will direct you to underserved businesses within the community. That will be specifically dedicated, which is not the norm for cities to do. That will be a distinct site for you to click on to provide your information at that site. So the best thing I can say right now is watch the website, start to have your information ready to go so that you hopefully can get access to the fund.
Excellent. So let's talk about how from a business owner, if one, am I able to apply for the grant and the loan? Two, what's the difference in terms of specific criteria? Applying for the loan, applying for the grant, if there is some.
Well, I think you have to make a choice which route you're going to go. I think you would have to decide. You won't be able to do both. It will be one or the other. The interest rates will be low enough that it would not impact the business. I don't actually have the interest rates in front of me, but I can tell you it's not something that it's something that's well below market. But truthfully, you have to decide the route or the loan route in this process.
Okay. Are nonprofits eligible to apply for the Small Business Continuity Fund?
The answer to that question is no. We had a lot of questions about that, but nonprofits are not eligible to apply for the Small Business Continuity Fund.
Okay. All right. And so as we began talking about the time frame, what is the projected timeline? Application will be ready, go online, complete the application to the point where you make your determination and you actually begin your payouts.
Here's what we're looking at. So starting May 4th, the application will become available. It's going to take about a week or so to review the applications. From start to finish, you're looking at probably anywhere from a 2 to 3 week timeline to get access to the funds. But we will try to accelerate that process. And I think once we get it handled on refining the timeline, I'm actually talking to staff today about that. How do we shorten the timeline? If we can get it done inside of 2 weeks, application, apply, week, review, hopefully next week, the following week, you'll get a disbursement. So it should go pretty fast. But I can tell you this, the funds are going to probably run out super fast. We've been doing some monitoring already on the websites, just the city website in general, and we're being inundated with calls in reference to both of the programs.
All right. What do you see going? Let me ask this. Are there any plans to develop funding for nonprofits who have been impacted by COVID-19?
Excuse me. Here's what I really think, because the impact of this virus has really changed the game in terms of how we're going to have to look at business development, community development, housing, infrastructure, everything across the board. While the current resources are not really tied to support nonprofits, I would say as we are moving through the process of thinking about different ways, we're going to have to figure out a way to get nonprofits involved to help us really rejuvenate Dallas going forward. Do I think that's going to take forever to do? No. Do we need some input from the nonprofit community in terms of what types of support, what types of initiatives that they can start to bring to bear that we can start to look at as fundable ideas? Because there will be resources that's going to come on the economic development side, and it's going to be super competitive. Myself and Councilmember Thomas was talking about this last week. there will be a piece out there that's coming that will be a series of competitive grants. Now, are there projects in the community that's being led by nonprofits that are transformative type projects that we can get behind? I would say absolutely. We need to know about those things so that we can start to go after resources and figure out ways to include nonprofits as part of this sort of regeneration. One thing we will be working on is a strategy in terms of what are the steps we're going to have to take long-term, sort of short-term, medium, long-term, which I personally believe nonprofits are going to have to be a part of that.
What do you see? Because like you said, we have a limited, let's start here. Share with those who are here, what was the source of funds that the city used? The Small Business Continuity Fund, and then let's even talk about the funds that were made available for the mortgage rental assistance program.
Yes, good question. The funds for the Small Business Continuity Fund is community development block grant dollars that's coming from the stimulus dollars that's coming to the city. We looked across the city to look at other ways, other resources to bring to bear on this. And at this current time, we really don't have much outside of that. Doesn't mean we're not going to stop looking. The same for the rental mortgage assistance. Those are CDBG dollars, emergency shelter grant dollars, and HOPWA dollars, which is all federal dollars that we are deploying to establish the housing mortgage rental assistance program. So that's the source for the funding.
Okay. Talk a little bit more about, the path going forward. We do have limited funds. What are we looking at in terms of, we know the Senate just passed a bill, and the House is supposed to be voting on the same bill today. In that bill, there's at least $60 billion that's going to be aside for businesses that we're targeting with half of the money. Any money that comes to the city directly, what would be the path forward? What are we looking at if we should have to get more funds from the federal government?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there will be another round of funding that will come to the city, sort of more or less in a second stimulus. Do we know what the amount is? Not yet, but we will continue to build upon some of the work that's already been done. So, for example, the Small Business Continuity Fund, we're going to look to continue to put resources into that. So if we get more money, we want to continue to try and capitalize that fund as well. If we have, depending on the resource amount, we will also look at additional support on the rental assistance program as well. So I would probably say we will continue to build upon those two. Are we anticipating it being a massive number? In the second round, we have no idea yet. We're still trying to figure out what that's going to look like.
Have there been discussions with business community, other entities about doing some type of matching funds or setting up some type of fund to support the work of the city that's going to be focused on some of these businesses that historically have served underutilized community?
There are some discussions out there about establishing some additional funds. And the city's perspective on that has been sort of, it's been two things. We don't have the resources to provide actual investments, as in like millions of dollars into a separate fund. However, what we could do is help with capacity to support implementing the fund. Second piece could be that if there are entities out there looking to partner with us, we would say you can contribute to our fund and really determine where you want the dollars to go. So if you say it, for example, we're starting out with 1.25 million dedicated to small businesses serving underserved communities. There's nothing that would prevent anyone from saying, hey, wow, we can contribute. I'm making a number of $500,000 and we want to dedicate $250,000 of that to the small businesses serving underserved communities. Matter of fact, we're really encouraging others to be able to do something like that so we can leverage what we have and try and maximize it as we continue to try and find additional resources.
Let's talk about promotion. We want to make sure that every small business that would qualify has this information, knows about this fund, knows about the criteria. What's our plan for getting the information out, and time frame we're looking at prior to it going live on the 4th?
Good question. We're working on a marketing plan strategy that will target chambers around the city of Dallas. We'll have a series of billboards that will come out highlighting the program, directing people to the site. We will have ongoing briefings about the plan, a pretty significant web presence that will communicate the nature of what the program is. So we're looking at all angles across. We're looking at a potential radio segment as well to communicate, to try and reach. We're going to also reach out to both the faith-based community so they can share with their members what the programs are. So we're actually working on that as we speak. May 4th launches the program. So look for more information to start hitting the airwaves in the next several days heading up to the 4th.
Let's give those who are on the call opportunity to learn a little bit something about you. Tell us a little bit about you, Dr. Johnson, how you got in this work.
Just talk a little bit about my background. First, I'm going to say this about my background. From my education to having a PhD, my real estate training at Harvard Graduate School of Design. I've worked on every single type of project you can think of. Started my career out as a community organizer, organizing some of the toughest neighborhoods in New Orleans, which is my hometown, to really build affordable housing and neighborhood type businesses. I've worked for city councils, former presidential fellow. I'm currently a Lisk Rubinger Fellow for my innovation in creating affordable housing. I've written some of the best affordable housing strategies in the country. Testified before the United States Congress on my ability to generate resources. I'm also a professor. I teach everything from economic development, real estate development. I've worked on big economic development projects from airport expansions to technology companies. I've done pretty much everything from A to Z. And I think my skill set is pertinent to what we're going to be facing in Dallas, which is going to be a total reset. So for me, I'm not a one horse pony that can only say, let me just run some transactions. I can run transactions. I can do all the financial analysis. I can pretty much do it all. But my perspective is this: I'm a huge collaborator. Try to rely on partnerships in the community. I don't have an ego about what I do. I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid to take on a challenge, because I have an old saying, why would you test your skill set in soft environments where it's relatively easy to do work? So for me, I think Dallas in particular going forward is going to need a balanced approach. It should not be one or the other. We should have a parallel economic development strategy that takes into consideration equally the ability to include and redevelop our underserved communities as well. To be a world-class city, we have to be able to have the two parallels running together. So, I do a lot of speaking around the country, workshops, panels, with an idea of really talking about connecting the dots. So for me, I'm going to bring all of that to the table. Looking forward to working with everyone, any creative ideas. I have this saying, because I'm also a former basketball player. So, my game is like Kobe Bryant, combination of Michael Jordan. So for me, I have this saying that I'm on Team Dallas. We're going to get to the championship. Do I know what that championship is yet? No, but we're going to need team players throughout the community to help us get there. So that's really how I look at this. I think we have a golden opportunity in terms of our focus coming out of this. It seems sort of desperate right now, but also say too, we need to have a perspective of looking at some businesses are going to go down. I think we also need to have a perspective of how do we relaunch, because the business went down, not necessarily because of your fault, but how do we, for example, we're looking at development projects, and there's a business in the community. It's a female. She's baking pies and cakes to offset her income. She's doing pretty well selling these pies. Why should we, in our developments, say, for example, why do we need a chain establishment where we can find someone from the community, take a part of our development projects, write down the cost on the commercial side to allow them to transition and be part of developments going forward? It's thinking like that I'm going to bring to the table, and also challenge the regular assumptions in terms of how we've been doing things. But for me, I just think this is going to require all of us to really work together to move the city forward. So, I can go on and on, but that's just a snapshot about me.
Well, we appreciate that insight. Personally, I can tell you this about Dallas as a native of the city. Dallas is a relational city, and we want to, know you, want to touch you, want to feel you, fortunately or unfortunately, you've had to come in and immediately put your hand to the plow and get to work and build the relationships as you go. But as we come out of this, getting to know you, knowing, your background, knowing your love of basketball, whether you're at the Kobe or Jordan level, time will tell. But just knowing that, you're all in, you're all in for seeing, Dallas become a resilient city. Dallas is a resilient city. It shows its resilience and comes out better on the other side. Now, in the few minutes that we have left, let's talk about this. Let's talk about post COVID-19. What are some things that you began? Because I know we're in the process of doing our economic development plan and policy. What are some things that you were looking at prior to COVID-19 or the effects of this virus? What were some things you were looking at as you were coming into the city that you saw that we could put some focus on or around? It could be housing, it could be economic development, because you oversee both areas.
Yeah, one thing I really noticed was, and I think we talked about this a little bit, this divide in Dallas, where you've got 85% of the tax base in the north, 15, towards the south. Southern Dallas represents a great opportunity for this city. So during my initial research coming in, I was first of all stunned to see the disparity, in particular related to the 85-15 scenario, but also stunned to see that there is so much potential in Southern Dallas. Not just that, but we have anchor institutions, we have universities, we have hospitals, we have land all throughout the city that I believe our challenge will be creating a powerful vision in terms of what Dallas can be with true executable strategies that we can deploy, tracking 5, 10, 15-year metrics on this thing. How do we better utilize our resources to create affordable housing? All developers are not the same. We need to figure out a way to work with aligned developers that also understand that, our resources are equally important to the private sector resources. I'm a huge supporter of development, but not at the expense of community. I believe we can get what we want and don't have to sacrifice community to do it. So looking at those things coming in was sort of the original basis of looking at Dallas. How do we accelerate development projects that's really including people from the community? Now here comes COVID. Okay, what's going to be the path going forward? I think what people are going to start to see coming out of the city in the next 90 days or so, it's going to be work around a new economic development plan that will have the two parallels. Equally important on the corporate business side, equally important at the neighborhood level to really help Dallas go forward. We're going to be looking at things like an infrastructure program. How do we take our infrastructure needs out there, accelerate that to put people to work? We're going to look at things such as running business plan competitions to test the ability of businesses out there to be a part of some of the work we're going to be doing going forward. How do we look at our relationships with the development community and looking at things like how can we write down space for transition? How can we truly build affordable housing, which I know absolutely a fact that it can be done with market rate development. So all of those things are going to have to move in tandem going forward. So in a nutshell, what I saw was a need for a vision, because as powerful as Dallas is, it's not necessarily known on the national landscape when you talk about the cities, the top 5 cities that come to mind. We need to make sure Dallas, coming out of this, is seen as a place to invest, grow businesses, et cetera, but it's doing it basically across the spectrum, from the community level all the way up to the corporate level. So that's really what I see heading in terms of the next 60, 90 days going forward.
Talk about a little bit more the economic development plan and policy. I'm really excited about it. I've been excited about it because it's a path forward. It's a path forward to bridge this gap between the North and the South by putting a greater emphasis for the first time as we develop a master plan and a policy and procedures around Southern Dallas, around workforce development. So talk a little bit about what you see that we need to include or focus on as a part of this plan, and the importance of workforce development as a key integral portion of the plan.
On the workforce development side, I think we tend to do injustice to people in the community when we don't align workforce training to the growing sectors, to the economic sectors. So I think the opportunity coming out of this plan will be to have a workforce development strategy that is aligned to the growing sectors. So for example, Dallas has let's say, for example, we're looking at the attraction of a biomedical company that's saying, wow, I want to come to Dallas. Yes, this is good, or an existing one. So we have to be able to say they may be bringing high-paying jobs, but rest assured that they may have a manufacturing component of their business that's producing healthcare, life-saving kits or something. And we know those jobs could pay between $15, $18, $20 an hour. How do we align our people to be in a position to have their skill sets match the growing sectors of the economy? To me, that's where it has to go, versus saying, hey, we're going to train you to be a licensed practical nurse or a something that is not going to be able to sustain those individuals throughout their lifetime. So the plan will talk about how we make those linkages going forward, which I think is going to be hugely important.
I think, and thank you so much for that. Since we are doing this through the Oak Cliff Chamber of Commerce, and Oak Cliff, at one point in time, Dr. J, was a city unto itself. Oak Cliff is probably about 60 or 70% of southern, Dallas. And what do you see the role of businesses that are in Oak Cliff and businesses, African American and Hispanic businesses that are located in Oak Cliff? How do you see these businesses playing a part in our development and their participation, which hadn't been the case in the past, in development of our economic development plan and policy?
Excuse me. I think, to answer your question, the businesses could help to craft the competitive advantage of those businesses in Oak Cliff, drawing a distinction as to why you should be here doing business, all of the competitive advantages that come along with that. I think Oak Cliff should focus on that, because the way I see Dallas, it's about the collective. What we usually do is say, here's downtown, let's invest, right? And this whole trickle down thing that is going to trickle to the neighborhoods and to the other areas, that's really not true. So we need areas like Oak Cliff, the chamber, to help define the competitive advantages of the businesses, of the people, the assets in those communities, so we can draw distinct support and resources to those areas. That is what I would really say. Because if you're going to talk about Dallas and you're talking at a high level, we need to be able to talk about unique components of that. And that is what makes this a great place. Not just because we have corporate headquarters or whatever, it's because we have areas supported by the Oak Cliff Chamber of Commerce that's helping to drive investment. If that makes sense, that's what I would really be looking for. So, for example, business facade programs, all sorts of things that start to emerge to help support businesses in those neighborhoods to really drive investment. That's really what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think as we look at the future of Dallas from an economic standpoint, we have to make sure that as we come out of COVID-19, that it's an opportunity for a reset. It's a lot of businesses that were surviving prior to this. So this is not just a way to refuel those businesses that were already doing well. This is an opportunity to help those businesses that were not. Big Mama may have just been able to just have a great recipe for frying chicken.
Yep.
Have the business acumen or skills necessary in order to take their business to the next level. I think this is an opportunity to provide that technical support, as well as mentorship and things of that nature for some of our businesses that represent and serve underutilized communities. Talk about that and how these businesses can have a real opportunity to reset and get the resources and the support that they've needed for a long time.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. One thing we have to look at is, you guys may be familiar with a concept called a drill down study. So traditional investors would do a market analysis and count rooftops and say, oh, okay, well, this community doesn't have the income. But a drill down study shows that, things that we normally miss, that we don't count, that we undervalue, we have to bring those things to the table to show the value of the community. So looking at strategies like that, looking at ways to not just support the existing businesses, but how are we going to grow some of the emerging businesses, but also provide housing stability time. Do I have all the answers right now? I'll probably say no. I will be relying on Oak Cliff to really get in the game and say, hey, Dr. Johnson, we need to focus on this. We look to reduce fragmentation, try to align some of our efforts. And, if Oak Cliff had to say, here is what we do, excuse me, over the next 12 to 24 months in this community, I would really like to know what that is. You guys said, man, if we do this, now we've got a target to start to go after, and we can start to put some emphasis on those things. And that's the type of things I'm going to be asking, so we can really help guide the work, and everyone can start to say, oh, wow, looking back 24 months from now, here are two things that we really set out to do, and the impact of that going forward will be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You guys may say, you know what, if we had a operating fund that was created for due to Oak Cliff Chamber that is doing X to get to Y, we have to think like that. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would really ask.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you said that, because I accept that as a charge from you to the Oak Cliff Chamber. As chair of the Economic Development Committee, I'm going to make that one of our goals, Dr. Johnson, for us to sit down and think out as far as Oak Cliff businesses, as far as the Oak Cliff community, over the next 12 months. What would that thing be? And then we come back with a list and present that to you, and see how we can provide what Oak Cliff says that it wants and needs, and make sure those who live in Oak Cliff benefit. One of the biggest challenges as we get ready to wrap up, and I'm going to kick it back over to Keandra in a couple of minutes, is a lack of access to grocery stores, a lack of access to quality retail. There is a perception about Oak Cliff and about Southern Dallas that, we don't deserve these things because we can't afford these things. But contrary to other people's opinions, we drive north and we pay for those things that we want, that we need. So speak about that for a second, Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, you know what? That is, first of all, I have pretty substantial experience in that arena. And that's why I was mentioning the point about the untapped potential. When you talk to grocery stores, for example, there are grocery stores, they may not be in Texas, they may be in California, they may be in a different location that would be interested in doing business. We have to make the business case and go after those types of uses to really bring it and talk about it from the perspective of not traditional markets. If you talk about it from traditional markets with traditional thinking entities, you're really going to be wasting your time. So to my point, if the grocery store, for example, is the sort of transformative piece that we need to focus on, and if we got a site, then we need, together as a community, we need to start to put those pieces together and start to shop the concept around the country to try and bring a grocery store, which I believe is achievable when they start to see the numbers, because the numbers are not necessarily what they think they are. If you can do a grocery store in South Bronx, during a period of time where the South Bronx was bombed out, income levels were basically low, and they brought in a grocery store by the name of Pathmart, that really proved the point that you can do this. You just have to align the market and look at things somewhat differently to make the business case. So I think it's doable. I think it's doable for the whole entire area. We just have to present it in a different light. Let me give an example of what I mean. Traditionally, you would look at someone living in a rundown home and you would make the assumption that they don't have disposable income. What you're missing is that person may be driving a Cadillac. Like, oh, they got disposable income. You may be looking at the person and saying, wow, they have a cable bill, they've got a series of things that you necessarily won't calculate in your analysis that would miss the true spending potential. We have to drill down and look at that, make the business case for the attraction of things like grocery stores, retailers that will be tailored to that community. So that's my thinking on that. Oh, mute.
Yep.
There it is.
Well, Dr. Johnson, I want to say thank you for participating. I think the timing couldn't have been better. We talked about a lot of things, but we got a chance to get something done on yesterday, and so to be able to come so in such a timely manner and talk about not only that, but talk about what we're looking at going forward, I appreciate it. And at this time, I'm gonna pass it back over to President Keandra Jones.
Okay, thank you very much, both to Councilmember Thomas and Dr. Eric Johnson. We're so very grateful to have you, Dr. Johnson, giving us that information. If you guys can see your screen at this time, what we've done is put up the Chamber's resource page, and as soon as the information becomes available to us, we are going to connect you to not only the city's resources, but other resources as well to help you personally and your business. I know there's a lot of information going on out there, and so we wanted to create a singular resource page that can hopefully get you the needs, get you and your business the resources that it needs. These resources are available in both English and Spanish, and all you have to do is go to oakcliffchamber.org/COVID-19/, and you can see a list of all of those resources. And again, thank you all for attending. Thank you, Dr. Johnson, Councilmember Thomas, and with that, you guys have a wonderful day.